All right. Hello, everybody. It says we're live, so let me double check a few things here, and then we will get rolling. It's not quite 7:30 yet, almost. But I think. Okay. There we go. It is 7:30. We are live. We have good audio. So let's get going. Hey everybody, I'm Michael Batiste, and this is Wapiti Wednesday live Q&A. Welcome everybody to the first live Q&A for 2022. So we do have some new people. Looks like a couple of them actually have joined in tonight. So welcome to the herd. Welcome to your first Wapiti live Q&A. So the way this works is this is actually an unlisted video. So if you're watching this on your computer and you click on the video, it's going to open in a YouTube page. But this is unlisted. Nobody else can see this except for you herd members that are part of the Elk Calling Academy herd. So if you are on your computer and you are in that screen, you will see on the right hand side a chat. So in that chat, you can actually go ahead and put in comments, questions, anything you want in there, and it's going to pop up live as I'm rolling through this. Now, if you're watching on your phone or a tablet, you still have that ability. Down underneath, you'll see three buttons: a heart, kind of a balloon, and then an upload. The balloon, actually, if you click on that, it's going to take you into another screen for comments, and you can go ahead and type in your comment or your question there, and then once you click submit, you'll see an arrow on the top, a left arrow. If you click that, it'll just bring you right back into the video. So, all right. So let's get into it tonight. Standing or kneeling? Which one's better? And what should you do in the setup? Should you stand or should you kneel? Now, standing and kneeling, each one has its pros and cons, advantages and disadvantages, and we're going to kind of talk about each of those first. So as far as standing goes, an advantage or a pro to standing is what you can see, and also the fact that you are actually over the top of any brush that there may be. The other nice advantage or pro of it is if that elk is coming in and you do need to adjust a little bit, it's a lot easier just to shuffle your feet and adjust, because maybe he got through the window that you wanted to stop him in and you got to stop him in another window. Or if he comes in from a different direction, you can make a quick adjustment as well there too. A disadvantage of standing is, one, elk and other animals recognize our silhouette. They recognize our silhouette as a threat. And so when you're standing, they recognize that silhouette a lot easier. Now, mind you, when we set up, and we'll dive more into setups in future episodes, but you always want something behind you because you want it to break up that silhouette. With wearing our camouflage and, something behind us, it breaks up our silhouette. But there may be times that a situation happens really, really fast and you're kind of caught out in the open a little bit. You don't really have anything behind you breaking up that silhouette. So that's another disadvantage there. Another disadvantage about standing is sometimes you might be in some low-hanging limbs or something that, it's better if you're lower to the ground so you can shoot under those items. Kneeling. Advantage or pro of kneeling is you're lower to the ground, so it breaks up your silhouette. You have the ability to shoot under branches and other items that may be higher up off the ground. Also to to me, it seems like when I'm lower to the ground kneeling like that, I can get away with a few more movements. And I think part of that is because it does break up the silhouette. So therefore, you do have that ability to change that. A disadvantage to kneeling, though, is kind of what we talked about with standing, where you can adjust if need be. When you're kneeling, that's a lot harder to do. So much harder to adjust, because it's not just shifting your feet, it's your knees and your feet and everything else. The other thing with kneeling too is your knees, especially if you're on your knees for a while. Your knees can get sore. You're having to go from sitting back on your heels to upright. Another disadvantage too is if you're down lower kneeling, you may not have the line of sight that you may have standing up. But you may also have better line of sight, because it's bringing your eyes closer to the ground so you can see under a lot of those branches, especially if you're hunting thick forested or thick timbered areas. It may be more of an advantage to be on your knees. Now, which one's better? It really is more of a case-by-case scenario, and it's going to adjust, and it's going to be different with each setup that you do. And also, too, the other thing that plays into it is the more, what you practice more with when you're shooting your bow. And most people practice standing up. Not a lot of people practice very much kneeling down, which I would recommend during your summer practice. Definitely kneel down. Take some shots kneeling down. If you've never really practiced taking a shot or drawing your bow when you're down on your knees, when you're in a hunting scenario, when you're in a setup and there's an elk coming in, that's not really the time that you really want to try that to see how it feels or this or that. Is it going to affect your anchor point? How are things with your front arm and all that? How is that going to come into play? So now, this time of year, leading up into practice and leading up into summer, kneel down for some shots. And honestly, too, if you have the ability, if you can sit flat on your butt and take some shots, practice in each of those. Practice in odd situations, hunched over a little bit because you have to shoot under anything. These are all practice sessions that you can do, that then when you're there in the setup, then you can modify. Okay? So, what, I'm going to stand here because I need to see over this little roll a little bit when he's coming in, so I know exactly which direction, which way I need to face, and when I need to draw. Where if you're kneeling down, you may not be able to see that. Or maybe you're on the edge of a ridge looking down. You may want to kneel down, be on your knees, basically because you don't want to be standing so tall and have your silhouette with that elk coming up from underneath you. But if you are standing and you have to kind of lean at an odd angle or something, if you're practicing that, you know what your equipment's going to do. And there are some times where, get into a setup, and one thing that I always do is I go ahead and clear things out from underneath my feet. If there's a pile of sticks or pine cones or this or that, I'll just take my feet and, brush those away. And it doesn't matter if I'm standing or kneeling, I do that same thing. Just for a few reasons, that if I do have to adjust, or I shift weight from right to left, or I have to move a little bit to change the angle, I'm not going to worry about popping a stick and alerting that elk. The other thing too is, if I am down on my knees, getting all that stuff out from underneath your knees is going to help with your knees sitting on those items, and your knees aren't going to get as sore that fast. Now, I know there's a lot of pants on the market now that have knee pads that you can tuck in, or if you don't want to tuck them in, just carry them in your pack, and when you get to the setup, get those knee pads out and lay them on the ground and put your knees on them. I tend to revert more to kneeling down. For me, it feels like I have more of a stable base when I'm shooting. Um, and there are times when, I'm on my knees and that animal, just based on what I'm hearing and stuff, he's not coming in the direction that we thought, and I have to adjust. Um, that I have the ability to do that. But there's been also times too that it's been a slow work where he hasn't come in, where I have stood up. And in fact, in the one-on-one video that you guys have access to in here, you'll actually see where when I'm moving in front of the camera and moving in on that bull, you'll see me drop down to my knees. Just because of where we were there was a little roll in the bottom that if I stood up, I couldn't see through the branches, very well in between us. But by kneeling down, I was lower to the ground and I could see farther through that. And it just gave me an advantage of seeing that bull come in, which way he's going to go, and kind of anticipating that stuff. Now, the drawback to that too is if I've got to move quickly, I have to stand up and move. Well, that time to stand up, that's a step or two that I could have taken to the right or to the left to get into another opening. But yeah, for me, I revert more to kneeling, just because, like I said, for me, I feel more stable. I feel like I blend in with my surrounding a little bit more. So for my preference, if there's not a lot of brush, I'm going to go ahead and kneel. Especially if you're in a situation where you're doing blind calling, kneeling down, can definitely be a lot more comfortable, and you can spend more time in that situation. Whereas if you're just standing there, you'll find yourself shifting, from right foot, put the weight on the left foot, and back and forth. But the other thing too is anytime I get to a setup, I'm going to do a quick survey of what my shooting lanes look like and what the vegetation looks like. And I'm going to make that call at that point on the fly of whether I'm going to stand or kneel. And, there's been times where I've sat there and I'm like, okay, I'm good. I'm going to go ahead and kneel down. But then once I kneel down and I really start looking at my shooting lanes and where I'm at, there's been times where it's like, man, I didn't notice that branch sticking up from that downed tree, that if he comes on the other side of that, I'm not going to be able to clear that with my shot. Then I'll go ahead and stand up and I'll take a look again and go, yep, okay, this is definitely what I need to do. I need to stand here to be able to make this shot. So reality, standing versus kneeling, it's what you feel more comfortable with. But also too, when you get into that setup, you're going to have to do a quick survey of what's going to be the best option for you as far as shot opportunity and how much coverage you can have in the possibility of the shooting lanes that he may come through. But everybody's going to have their own little preference on which one they feel better with and which one they're going to kind of revert to more. And honestly, for me, when I get to a situation or when I get to a setup place, it's almost automatic where I just drop to my knees. That's the first thing. I drop to my knees and take that look around, just because if I have clear shot angles, I'm going to stay on my knees. So not too many times have I chosen one way or another and it's cost me a shot opportunity. More times in those shot opportunities not being able to happen, it could be, more times than not, it's where that bull stops. That there's branches blocking the vitals, or, just a wrong angle. In fact, I remember there was a bull that was working, and he was actually elevated. He was above us, but he was coming down at a 45-degree angle. And we happened to be working up on the trail that he was coming down. And we got to this spot where it kind of dipped down and then there was a little rise. And I knew there wasn't enough time to get through that little dip up to the rise. And so I actually dropped down to my knees right there. And then he popped up on that rise. And if I was standing, and he had, it just gave me the right shot angle to be able to get the arrow up through. It was a tough angle. It was a tough shot. But because of the confidence that I had in the stability that I had in the base of kneeling down, I took the shot. And honestly, when I stood up and looking at where he was, I don't think I could have made that shot because of how he was standing, and I would have gotten into the scapula of the shoulder blade because of the angle. But because I was down lower onto the ground, I was actually able, he was actually slightly quartered to me, but his near leg was back, and so I knew there was a soft pocket right in here. And because I was coming from a lower angle, I actually got up into that soft pocket, and I hit the bottom of the near lung, the top of the heart, and then it went out the top of the lung on the opposite side. Now, had I been standing, I wouldn't have been able to make that shot. So that was a situation there where kneeling down was definitely the only choice I had. Remember another time where, hunting an area that was kind of broken up between pockets of timber and sagebrush, and you had a little bit of transition where the sagebrush was in the timber. That was a scenario that as soon as I got to my setup, kind of started running through my checklist. I did what I normally do. I dropped down on my knees and started looking at everything, and I knew immediately right away that there was no way that I was going to be able to stay on my knees because I wouldn't have been able to clear over the top of the sagebrush. So most definitely had to, change that and go ahead and stand up. Again, it worked out well because where he stopped, that sagebrush was actually blocking a little bit of the lower belly that had I been down, there's no way I could have got it through the top of that sagebrush without the possibility of it deflecting. So it had to stand up. And, sometimes it happens so fast too that you don't have an option. You just got to take what's given because it does happen so fast. So stand or kneel. For me personally, I'm going to kneel more than I'm going to stand. So as long as everything is good and I have clear lanes from kneeling, I'm going to do that. So that's my personal preference. So, all right, guys, hopefully that kind of clears it up on standing or kneeling and kind of gives you an idea of things to think about. So remember, when you get into that setup, and that's what's kind of nice, if you're in a 2-on-1 scenario, you have a little bit more time to set up and go through it. But if you're 1-on-1, there's a lot of times with 1-on-1 where, it's just you versus that bull, and you're having to move quite a bit towards him. And so that's where as that thing unfolds, you're going to just have to take what's given. And what I mean by that is as you're working to the bull and he's working to you, you're going to find yourself in that point where it's like, I can't move anymore. This is where I'm at. And you're going to have to do a quick survey. And more times than not in that scenario, that's when I'll drop down to the ground because I may not have the perfect background to break up my silhouette like I mentioned. So, which definitely happens. You definitely can, get into that. So, all right, guys, stand or kneel. Definitely try practicing both with your bow and see which one you feel more comfortable with. All right, guys. So, I wanted to thank all of you for your feedback on the last episode, that we did. And, as far as where I was talking about things that we may do this year with Zoom instead of YouTube. Zoom, where we can all be on with camera, or with you guys joining audio only. Get into a group discussion, more interactive. Several of you said you love that idea and definitely would be interested in that. So we definitely will put a Zoom session together. The one thing about Zoom is, if we get multiple people on it, we have about a 45-minute time limit before it stops. So if we are in the middle of a pretty good discussion or a pretty good topic, there is a chance that Zoom may just cut out on us. It may just stop streaming. But that's just one of the things that we're just going to have to deal with together and go through that. But definitely will. Also, several of you chimed in and messaged me. I asked about bringing some of you guys on and talking about your journey. Several of you had mentioned you would be interested in coming on and doing that. And so I will be lining a few of those up as well. And then I know last year brought on a couple of guests, a guy from Western Contours and Jim Huntsman from the Western Huntsman, came on. Going to be having some more guests this year. I've talked to Joe Gilia with Elk Bros about coming on. Talked to Chad at Backcountry Rookies about coming on, and a few other guests as well to bring on just to kind of talk about different views or different approaches to elk hunting, and also their background, their experience, their journey. I think when you hear other people talk about their journeys, and especially if they're fairly new into elk hunting, you're going to find that there's a lot of similar mistakes and there's a lot of similar experiences. And it's one of those things that, can just help everybody learn. So, but yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to all of you that chimed in. Thank you to all of you guys that tuned in tonight. 2022, there is a lot of exciting things coming. It's going to be a great year. So far, some of you have also asked about shows, because, show season is getting ready to kick off, and what shows I'm going to be going to. Next week, I am going to be down in Reno for the sheep show. I'm going to be down there on Thursday. I don't have a lot of time in there, but just going to be there Thursday morning for a little while. And then in February, I will be over in Salt Lake at the Western Hunting Conservation Expo. So far, my schedule at that one is I am going to be half a day on Friday and half a day on Saturday in the initial ascent booth. The rest of the time, I'm going to be out wandering around, just visiting other booths. And so if you're there, I'm going to work the first half of each day in the initial ascent booth. So if you're there, come by, find me at the initial ascent booth. Introduce yourself if we haven't met in person. Would love to meet all of you there that can make it. And if it's in the afternoon, I'm going to be wandering around. If you see me wandering around, definitely come on up, say hi. Let's talk about elk hunting. So those are the only two shows that I have scheduled this year. So, all right, guys, as always, thanks for tuning in. Keep calling, keep practicing. Most importantly, though, have fun. And we'll see you guys in 2 weeks on the next Wapiti Live Q&A. Have a great night, everybody.